First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Selves in Compassion calls for growing the 5 virtues: determination, repetition, owning your nobility, reproaching your demons, and aspiring to the impossible. Today we look at reproaching your demons. There's a popular saying, embrace your demons, and yes, accepting the reality that they exist and acknowledging that in some ways they may have done some positive things for you is important. But if, on balance, they are doing you more harm than good, reproach them for that. If we are honest, we have to admit we have a lot of bad habits that keep appearing over and over again, despite our good intentions. Underneath that, we have a sacred, noble human nature, as we know from last week's training in compassion, owning your nobility. With that knowledge, we can correct what needs correcting. Your bad habits like greed or anger or selfishness can be thought of as demons who come to visit you more often than you'd like, and you can reproach them. Hey, you did it again. Cut that out. Stop that. And still maintain a gentleness and sense of humor. First, try to become as familiar as you can with some of your most popular bad habits. Study them. Be intensely curious about them. How does it feel? How does it cause you to think and want to act? Your demons are not you. They visit you, and you are responsible for dealing with them. A gentle reproach won't prevent them from recurring, but it reduces their dominance. You can have a much more flexible and even humorous attitude toward yourself and your many faults than you ever thought possible, and then everything becomes much more workable.
We come now to our offering, recalling the words of the inclusion section of the UUA bylaws. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to being an association of congregations that empowers and enhances everyone's participation, especially those with historically marginalized identities. In gratitude, then, we give, and in gratitude, we receive.
We have an extensive reading today, a bit of reader's theater, and I'll go from there straight into the sermon, which will be in just one part today, so there won't be an interlude. Our reading is a segment from the conclusion of the classic 1936 play by George Kaufman and Moss Hart, three-act play, You Can't Take It With You. Here's the story leading up to the segment that we will share. In New York City lives the Sycamore family, eccentric and free-spirited. Their guests and visitors likewise, which makes for a quirky and chaotic household. They lead lives that seem to them fulfilling, howsoever unconventional. The family patriarch, Grandpa Martin Vanderhoff, has rejected the rat race and spends his days attending circuses and collecting snakes. Grandpa's daughter, Penny, has taken to a typewriter that was accidentally delivered. She pounds away on it, turning out terrible play after terrible play. Grandpa's son-in-law, Penny's husband, Paul, makes fireworks in the basement with Mr. DePina, a man who came to deliver ice years ago and never left. Penny and Paul have two young adult daughters, Grandpa's granddaughters, Essie and Alice. Essie aspires to be a ballerina and makes candy. Essie's husband, Ed, helps her with the candy business and loves printing strange slogans on the printing press. Essie's sister, Alice, is the normal one. Alice works as a secretary in a Wall Street office, and she has fallen in love with Tony Kirby, her boss's son. Alice worries that her family's eccentricities might ruin her relationship with Tony. Tony is less concerned. He loves Alice for who she is. But Alice insists on having both families meet before they consider marriage, and she is nervous about how that meeting will go. Act 1 ends with plans for a dinner where the very conventional upper-class Kirbys will meet the unconventional anarchic Sycamores. In Act 2, the Kirbys and Sycamores meet at the Sycamore home, but the conservative Kirbys show up a day early. The son, Tony Kirby, has deliberately brought his parents over on the wrong day because he wants them to see the Sycamores as they naturally are. Tony hopes that such an experience will show his parents that valuing freedom and individuality and joy, as the Sycamores do, is a legitimate alternative to the Kirby values of wealth and status and propriety. Disaster ensues. The Kirbys are utterly bewildered and scandalized by the Sycamore's unconventional behavior. The evening spirals into awkward chaos. Penny wants to play silly parlor games about people's secret desires. Grandpa challenges Mr. Kirby's rigid views on wealth and success. Mr. DePina bursts in covered in soot from the basement fireworks. Essie dances through the living room in her ballet costume. Essie's husband, Ed, hands out pamphlets he has printed on the printing press, apparently oblivious to their seditious content. Suddenly, there's an explosion from the homemade fireworks in the basement. In the chaos, the police arrive, arresting everyone for disturbing the peace and possessing illegal fireworks. Act 2 ends with everyone being carted off to jail, a social and literal explosion of the dinner's intended civility. The third and final act takes place the next day in the Sycamore living room after the night of chaos and arrests. Alice is humiliated by the disastrous dinner and the social clash between the families. Feeling that their worlds are too different, she decides to break off her engagement to Tony and plans to leave town. Mr. Kirby arrives to take Tony home and away from the chaos of the Sycamore family. But Grandpa has some thoughts to share with Mr. Kirby.
I hardly need to say that this is as painful to Mrs. Kirby and myself as it is to you people. I'm sorry, but I'm sure you understand.
Well, yes, and in a way, no. Now, I'm not the kind of person who tries to run other people's lives, but the fact is, Mr. Kirby, I don't think these two young people has got as much sense as you and I have.
Grandpa, will you please not do this?
I'm just talking to Mr. Kirby. A cat can look at a king, can't he?
Are you ready, Tony?
Mr. Kirby, I suppose after last night, you think this family is kind of crazy.
No, I would not say that, although I am not accustomed to going out to dinner and spending the night in jail.
Well, you've got to remember, Mr. Kirby, you came on the wrong night. Now tonight, I bet you nothing will happen at all. Maybe.
Mr. Vanderhoff, it was not merely last night that convinced Mrs. Kirby and myself that this engagement would be unwise.
Father, I can handle my own affairs. Alice, for the last time, will you marry me?
No, Tony. I know exactly what your father means, and he's right.
No, he's not, Alice.
Alice, you're in love with this boy, and you're not marrying him because of the kind of people we are.
Grandpa.
I know you think the two families wouldn't get along. Well, maybe they wouldn't. But who says they're right and we're wrong?
I didn't say that, Grandpa. I only feel it's...
Well, what I feel is that Tony's too nice a boy to wake up 20 years from now with nothing in his life but stocks and bonds.
How's that?
Yes, mixed up and unhappy, the way you are.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Vanderhoff. I am a very happy man.
Are you?
Certainly I am.
I don't think so. What do you think you get your indigestion from? Happiness? No, sir. You get it because most of your time is spent doing things that you don't want to do.
I don't do anything I don't want to do.
Yes, you do. You said last night at the end of a week in Wall Street, you're pretty near crazy. Why do you keep on doing it?
Why do I keep on? Why? That's my business. A man can't give up his business.
Why not? You've got all the money you need. You can't take it with you.
That's a very easy thing for you to say, Mr. Vanderhoff. But I've spent my entire life building up my business.
And what's it got you? Same kind of mail every morning, same kind of deals, same kind of meetings, same dinners at night, same indigestion. Where does the fun come in? Don't you think there ought to be something more, Mr. Kirby? You must have wanted more than that when you started out. We haven't got too much time, you know, any of us.
What do you expect me to do? Live the way you do? Do nothing?
Well, I have a lot of fun. Time enough for everything. Read, talk, visit the zoo now and then, practice my darts, even have time to notice when spring comes around. Don't see anybody I don't want to. Don't have 6 hours of things I have to do every day before I get 1 hour to do what I like. And I haven't taken bicarbonate of soda in 35 years. What's the matter with that?
The matter with that? Suppose we all did it. A fine world we'd have. Everybody going into zoos. Don't be ridiculous, Mr. Vanderhoff. Who would do the work?
There's always people that like to work. You can't stop them. Inventions, and they fly the ocean. There's always people to go down to Wall Street too, because they like it. But from what I've seen of you, I don't think you're one of them. I think you're missing something.
I'm not aware of missing anything.
I wasn't either, till I quit. I used to go down to that office 9 o'clock sharp, no matter how I felt. Lay awake nights for fear I wouldn't get the contract. Used to worry about the world too. Got all worked up about whether Cleveland or Blaine was going to be elected president. Seemed awful important at the time, but who cares now? What I'm trying to say, Mr. Kirby, is that I've had 35 years that nobody can take away from me, no matter what they do to the world. See?
Yes, I do see. And it's a very dangerous philosophy, Mr. Vanderhoff. It's un-American. And it's exactly why I'm opposed to this marriage. I don't want Tony to come under its influence.
What's the matter with that, Father?
Matter with it? Why, it's downright communism. That's what it is.
You didn't always think so.
I most certainly did. What are you talking about?
I'll tell you what I'm talking about. You didn't always think so, because there was a time when you wanted to be a trapeze artist.
Why don't be an idiot, Tony?
Oh, yes, you did. I came across those letters you wrote to Grandfather. Do you remember those?
No! How dared you read those letters? How dared you?
Why? Isn't that wonderful? Did you wear tights, Mr. Kirby?
Certainly not. The whole thing is absurd. I was 14 years old at the time.
Yes, but at 18, you wanted to be a saxophone player, didn't you?
Tony!
Oh, and at 21, you went away from home because Grandfather wanted you to go into the business. It's all down there in black and white. You didn't always think so.
Well.
I may have had silly notions in my youth, but thank God my father knocked them out of me. I went into the business and forgot about them.
Well, not altogether, Father. There's still that saxophone in the back of your clothes closet.
There is?
That's enough, Tony. We'll discuss this later.
No, I want to talk about it now. I think Mr. Vanderhoff is right, dead right. I'm not going back to that office. I've always hated it, and I'm not going on with it. And I'll tell you something else. I didn't make a mistake last night. I knew it was the wrong night. I brought you here on purpose.
Tony!
Because I wanted to wake you up. I wanted you to see a real family, as they really were. A family that loved and understood each other. You don't understand me. You've never had time. Well, I'm not going to make your mistake. I'm clearing out.
Clearing out? What do you mean?
I mean, I'm not going to be pushed into business just because I'm your son. I'm getting out while there's still time.
But Tony, what are you going to do?
I don't know. Maybe I'll be a bricklayer, but at least I'll be doing something I want.
You know, Mr. Kirby, Tony is going through just what you and I did when we were his age. I think if you listen hard enough, you can hear yourself saying the same things to your father 25 years ago. We all did it, and we were right. How many of us would be willing to settle when we're young for what we eventually got? Plans we make, what happens to them? It's only a handful of the lucky ones that can look back and say they even came close. So before they clean out that closet, Mr. Kirby, I think I'd get a few hours in on the saxophone.
At just that point, the Grand Duchess Olga Katrina comes in from the kitchen. She is a deposed Russian royal, now working in Manhattan as a waitress, and as a friend of Kolenkov, Essie's Russian ballet instructor, she has become yet another colorful character in the Sycamore's circle. The Grand Duchess announces that she has been cooking dinner for everyone, and the blintzes are now ready. Mr. Kirby begins to soften, perhaps from Grandpa's words, or from his son's revelations and the remembrance of his own youthful aspirations. Or perhaps he's impressed that the Sycamores have a Grand Duchess cooking blintzes in their kitchen. But he agrees to stay for dinner. Tony and Alice reconcile, and as the family gathers around the table, Grandpa offers a blessing.
Well, sir, here we are again. We want to say thanks once more for everything you've done for us. Things seem to be going along fine. Alice is going to marry Tony, and it looks as if they're going to be very happy. Of course, the fireworks blew up, but that was Mr. DePina's fault, not yours. We've all got our health, and as far as anything else is concerned, we'll leave it to you. Thank you.
So during this graduation season, what I have for you today is as much a commencement address as it is a sermon, because it's about discerning your vocation as you head forth. I'm speaking today especially to our graduating seniors, though all of us are, after all, graduating from our pasts and commencing into what comes next. So I'll begin this commencement address as a true old fogey such as myself would begin an address to young graduates by saying, when I was your age, when I was about your age, 17 or so, I saw 2 plays within the span of about a year that were transformative for me. They changed my outlook on life. And both of those plays were originally written and produced in the 1930s. One was Thornton Wilder's Our Town, which powerfully impressed upon me the transience and preciousness of ordinary human life decades before I had Zen teachers who stressed the same point. Even the smallest, most mundane moments of daily life hold profound beauty and meaning. Emily Webb comes to realize this in the final act after her death, and she cries out, "Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute?" Emily's challenge pierced my teenage heart, and it has lived there ever since. The other formative play that I saw in my youth was George Kaufman and Moss Hart's You Can't Take It With You. I was charmed with the eccentric sycamores, as theater goers have been since 1936. The particular point that got me was Grandpa's response when Mr. Kirby says, "Who would do the work?" When Mr. Kirby asked that question, I leaned forward in my seat because that's just what I was wondering too. The sycamores were delightful characters, but somebody's got to do the work, right? Grandpa replies, "There's always people that like to work. You can't stop them. There are always people to go down to Wall Street too because they like it." And that was such a liberating message. It gave me permission, before I had ever heard of Joseph Campbell, to follow my bliss. A few years later, I was a college sophomore settling on a major, and I chose philosophy, not pre-law or pre-med or business, and Grandpa Vanderhoof's permission helped make that decision possible. In the course of those philosophy classes, I learned about Kantian ethics, which casts some light back on the issue between Mr. Kirby and Grandpa. Kantian ethics tells us to, quote, "so act that the maximum of action could be willed a universal law for all." In other words, before you do something, ask yourself, what if everybody did that? Mr. Kirby may perhaps be seen as operating from a Kantian principle. "Suppose we all did it," he asks Grandpa, insinuating that if everyone lived as Grandpa did, then the world would be a mess. But Grandpa points out the weakness in Kantian ethics. We need not, at least not always, guide ourselves by what would happen if everybody did something, because the empirical fact is, whatever you decide to do, most other people simply won't also do that. So you might turn to utilitarianism, a school of ethics that says, so act as to create the greatest good for the greatest number. But the problem with basing our actions on their results is that we know very little of what the results of a given action will be. Aside from a few possible actions with foreseeable short-term consequences, calculating the probabilities of all possible outcomes within a given time period and deciding how to weight the value of each outcome is more than a human brain can do with any accuracy. If Kantian ethics is not empirical enough, that is, it ignores the empirical reality that other people will do different things, then utilitarian ethics is too empirical. That is, it asks us to predict empirical results beyond the human capacity to do so. What both of those schools of ethics ask us to do is think about what would be the right thing to do for anyone similarly situated. They offer different procedures for deciding what would be the right thing to do for anybody who finds themselves in a given situation, but their root concern is with what is right for any person. But the question of calling asks a different question. What are you called to do? You, in all your uniqueness, with your particular gifts and shadows, obsessions and interests, knowing what you know and having the blind spots that you have. What is yours to do that wouldn't be anyone else's? A person's true calling cannot be assessed on Kantian grounds or on utilitarian grounds. In discerning your calling, the question is not, what if everybody did that? But rather, what is it that calls to my unique heart to do, knowing that others will make other choices? Not what will be the consequences for the world, because except in a very limited way, those can't be predicted. But rather, how do I be true to who I am? Grandpa says there will always be people who want to work in business and on Wall Street. Some people are called to that sort of work. Others are called to a different path. We need not worry about whether the world will fall apart if everyone follows our example, because not everyone will. The discernment and carrying out of your life's calling involves balancing 3 directives. The first one is follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says. That's important, but it's not the only factor. 2, along the way, try to help others. Tend to the needs of a bruised and hurting world. It's true we can't predict consequences very well, but we can try to live from care, and then let the consequences take care of themselves. 3, bring a wholesome discipline to the execution of your vocation. The denizens of the Sycamore household are great at following their bliss, but rather neglectful of numbers 2 and 3, helping the world and having some discipline. The point about balancing your unique talents and interests with the world's needs was elegantly expressed in an oft-quoted passage from the 1973 book Wishful Thinking by Presbyterian minister and theologian Frederick Buechner. It's worth recalling and remembering. Vocation, Buechner writes, comes from the Latin vocare, to call, and it means the work a man is called to by God, or, as we might say, the work a person is called to by their true, authentic self. There are all different kinds of voices, Buechner continues, calling you at all different kinds of work. And the problem is to find out which is the voice of God rather than of society, say, or the superego or self-interest. That is, what is the authentic voice for you in the midst of passing impulses and pressures? By and large, a good rule for finding out is this. The kind of work God usually calls you to is the kind of work, A, that you need most to do, and B, that the world most needs to have done. If you really get a kick out of your work, you've presumably met requirement A. But if your work is writing TV deodorant commercials, the chances are you've missed requirement B. On the other hand, if your work is probably met requirement B, but if most of the time you are bored and depressed by it, the chances are you've not only bypassed A, but probably aren't helping your patients much either. Neither the hair shirt nor the soft berth will do. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. End quote. So, yeah, you do have to take into account what the world needs, along with looking at your unique gifts and interests, the idiosyncratic joy that swells your heart, even if it swells no one else's. A healthy society needs diversity. Some to trade stocks, if that's their joy, some to dance through the living room, some to make blintzes for whoever is around. But neither the hair shirt nor the soft berth will do. Around the time that I first saw Our Town, Can't Take It With You, another voice from earlier in the 20th century was also ringing in my ears, Max Ehrmann's 1927 Desiderata, which has a line, "Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself." So there's factor number 3. There is a role for wholesome discipline, for sticking with something even when it isn't all that joyful. If your joy is painting landscapes or writing poetry or playing music, for those activities to rise from hobby to vocation, even if it's an unpaid vocation, will require discipline, a commitment to practice your chosen craft even when you might not feel like it. Follow your bliss, yes, and follow it even when it's not feeling very blissful. Discipline and hard work matter. As both Joseph Campbell and Parker Palmer both emphasize, true vocation requires commitment, labor, and resilience to bring good into the world. In that sense, the sycamores embody the spark of vocation without the steady flame. You Can't Take It With You has had enduring popularity since it first hit the stage in the 1930s. Through the 50s and 60s, it seemed every high school in the country was putting on You Can't Take It With You. It was less common in the 70s and 80s, though that's when I first saw it. But then starting in the 90s, there's been a modest resurgence in productions of that play. A successful revival with James Earl Jones as Grandpa Vanderhoff opened on Broadway in 2014 to critical acclaim and multiple award nominations. There's a shot from that production on your cover of your order of service. Our own Faithiana Leonard tells me that the Simpson College senior play of 2018 was You Can't Take It With You, and that she herself played Penny Sycamore in that production. It's a play with perennial appeal because we need that reminder that one's worth is not dependent on one's bank account, that life can be meaningful and joyful without money, status, or conformity. We need to see an exuberant celebration of people doing what brings them joy, not driven by duty or market value. We need to see loving, generous, tolerant people who have made their household a haven of hospitality for outsiders and misfits, who don't take themselves too seriously, who reject the capitalist notion of relentless self-improvement in favor of delight for delight's sake. We need to be prompted to ask ourselves what might be in our closets gathering dust, like Mr. Kirby's saxophone, and reminded that it's not too late to pull it out and blow on that thing for an hour every now and then. But what we need to be, as opposed to the reminders we need to see on a stage, is people engaged in social justice, civic responsibility, and addressing the suffering of the broader world. People with the discipline to turn interests and inclinations into real service or lasting beauty. Without that, the sycamores don't have a vocation, they just have hobbies. Hobbies are nice to have along with a vocation, but they're no substitute for vocation. What Grandpa Vanderhoff tried to teach Mr. Kirby, what Emily Webb learned too late, and what Joseph Campbell and Frederick Buechner and Max Ehrman are all pointing to is this. This brief and precious life is not something to be endured while chasing wealth or status or the approval of others. We're called to discover what makes our hearts sing, and then to bring commitment and discipline to training ourselves to sing it. Whether you are graduating from high school or graduating into your 97th year, you have gifts. So what hunger in the world might your gladness help to feed? And along with that vocation, what are the recreations that restore your spirit? Pull that saxophone out of the closet. Write that poem, plant that garden, march in that pride parade this afternoon. Teach that child, tend that wound, befriend that lonely soul. Not because everyone should, but because it is what is yours to do. Amen.